Raising red worms, a simple yet incredibly valuable practice in agriculture. Have you heard about it? However, many people are still unaware of the immense benefits these tiny creatures bring. So, what value does raising red worms offer, and why is it considered a treasure in agricultural production? Firstly, when you raise red worms, you can harvest them as commercial worms, an excellent source of feed for animals such as chickens, ducks, geese, shrimp, crabs, fish, eels, frogs, turtles, and more. Additionally, products made from worms, like worm powder, are supplied to factories where they are mixed with other ingredients to create feed pellets for livestock. Not only does this benefit your household, but surplus worms can also be sold on the market for a significant income. Secondly, the second major product is worm castings, a top-tier organic microbial fertilizer for agriculture. Worm castings are perfect for fertilizing a wide variety of plants, from fruit trees and vegetables to ornamental plants in your home or farm. If you raise worms on a larger scale, you can also sell worm castings, creating a sustainable income stream. In this way, raising red worms not only provides direct benefits from worms and castings, but also helps promote sustainable agriculture and protect the environment. In today's video, I'll share a detailed guide on raising red worms, from setting up a worm farming system and choosing the right breed to proper care techniques for the best results. If you find this video useful, please leave a like and subscribe to the channel to support me. Let's explore the amazing value that red worms bring together. To start raising red worms, you only need to prepare a few basic but essential elements. First, the worm farming setup. This is where the worms will grow and thrive, so setting up a proper farming environment is the first and most crucial step. Second, the food source. Red worms mainly feed on livestock manure or agricultural byproducts, such as water hyacinth, spoiled fruits and vegetables, straw, and other organic waste. The great thing is that in rural areas, these resources are almost always readily available. If you are raising livestock, the natural manure produced becomes an ideal food source for red worms. Third, the worm breed. Once you have the farming setup and food source ready, the next step is to purchase worm breeds. The special thing about red worms is that you only need to buy them once. Red worms reproduce quickly and continuously regenerate their population. This means you can raise them long-term without worrying about additional costs for breeding in the future. The simplicity of preparation, along with the low cost and natural regenerative ability of red worms, makes this model an excellent, effective, and sustainable choice for agriculture. Building shelters for red worms is not complicated, and you can make use of available resources at home to save costs. Old barns, as well as unused shelters for cattle, pigs, or chickens, can be repurposed for worm farming. However, to ensure the worms grow well, the shelter needs to meet basic requirements, such as having a roof to protect from the sun and rain, and being built on elevated ground to avoid flooding during rainy weather. For the roof, you can use corrugated sheets or tarpaulin to cover the worm shelter. The roof should be at least 1 meter high to ensure proper ventilation and make it convenient for caring for and harvesting the worms later. The ideal size for the worm bed is a width of 0.5 to 0.8 meters, a height of about 30 centimeters, and the length depending on the available land. This height is sufficient to save space, prevent waste, and facilitate the care process. Cleaning and disinfecting the worm shelter before introducing the worms is essential. You can use veterinary or agricultural products recommended by experts to ensure the best results and safety for the worms. The flooring of the worm shelter is a crucial factor. Red worms thrive in a moist environment, but it should not be too wet, so the floor needs to have good drainage. You can choose between soil, sand, or cement flooring, depending on the resources available. If you use soil or sand, the advantage is low cost and good drainage. However, the downside is the need for frequent watering to maintain moisture, especially during hot days. Cement flooring makes it easier to harvest worm castings and prevents plant roots from intruding, but it will be more expensive. One important note is to never use tarps or nylon sheets under the floor of the shelter, as they do not allow for proper drainage, which can lead to waterlogging. This would cause the worms to die and the eggs to rot, preventing them from hatching and ultimately causing the worm farming to fail. Instead, if farming on soil or sand, you can lay a thick layer of netting before placing the worms. This will make harvesting the worm castings easier later on. And the final tip, if you build a high roof, it's advisable to cover the sides with black mesh to block direct sunlight from hitting the worm farming area and prevent rain from splashing in. The food of red worms consists of animal manure such as cow manure, buffalo manure, pig manure, or agricultural byproducts like spoiled vegetables and fruits. In agricultural production, many byproducts such as cow, buffalo, pig manure, or spoiled vegetables and fruits are often discarded or only used directly as fertilizers for plants. However, if these byproducts are utilized to farm red worms, you can produce worm castings, a nutrient-rich fertilizer that is much more valuable. By understanding this, farming practices can optimize profits by transforming what would otherwise be waste into valuable products, benefiting crops, and potentially selling them in the market to generate additional income. Red worms are toothless, so their preferred food is soft, pre-soaked manure or composted organic waste. Therefore, before placing the worms, you should soak the manure or compost the waste to soften the food. To soak the manure, you should build a tank or dig a pit lined with plastic to soak it. This can be done before or while setting up the worm farm, ensuring that the manure is soaked for as long as possible. The soaking tank should ideally be placed at the center or as close as possible to the worm farm to make feeding the worms more convenient and reduce effort later. Once the soaking tank is ready, gather the manure into the tank and pump water to soak it for about 2 to 3 days until the manure softens and is ready for the worms to eat. To improve the soaking process, reduce foul odors, and speed up the softening process, you can also add microbial products directly into the tank along with the manure. Feeding red worms can be relatively simple, but to achieve high efficiency, it's important to apply methods suitable for different conditions and farming scales. Below are 2 common methods used in red worm farming. Method 1. Feeding with a diluted mixture on the surface. This method is one of the most effective ways to farm red worms. After placing the worms, you can feed them right away or wait until the next day. You simply need to use a ladle to scoop the pre-diluted compost and evenly spread it over the worm bed surface. For larger-scale farming, specialized vehicles can be used to facilitate the process and save time and labor. After feeding, cover the surface with a tarp or black mesh to keep the worm's environment dark and moist, promoting better growth. Check the surface again after 2 to 3 days. If the compost has been consumed, it's time to feed them again. If not, wait until they finish before the next feeding. Method 2. Feeding with a dry mixture on the surface. In this method, you only need to spread fresh compost without soaking it over the worm bed surface. Then, lightly water it to soften the compost and increase the moisture level for the worms. Finally, cover the surface with a tarp to retain moisture. This method is simple and quick, making it especially suitable for those with limited time or large-scale operations. However, while easy to implement, this method doesn't support as vigorous growth in worms as the diluted feeding method. Nonetheless, it's a reasonable choice for those with limited time or large-scale farming operations. Conclusion: among the 2 methods, feeding with a diluted mixture on the surface is the optimal choice for achieving high productivity. Along with preparing the worm farm and food for the red worms, it is also the time to research and choose a reputable supplier for the red worm seedlings. This way, once the worm farm is built and the food is ready, you will have the red worms available for immediate release, saving time from waiting. Red worm seedlings consist of a combination of parent worms, mature worms, young worms, eggs, and their living environment. When purchasing red worm seedlings, you should buy them in this biomass form. Good quality red worm seedlings are evaluated based on several criteria. The worm density in the biomass should be high, the biomass moisture content should be 60 to 70%, the minimum time from harvest to receiving the seedling should be 45 days, and only the top 5-7 centimeters of the worm bed surface should be used for harvesting seedlings. Once the red worm seedlings are transported to the farm, you should release them immediately so that they can quickly adapt to the new environment and grow healthily. To do this, spread the biomass directly on the farm floor, then use a rake or your hands to evenly distribute the worms across the worm bed surface. The recommended density for releasing the seedlings is about 10 to 15 kilograms per square meter. After releasing the seedlings, cover the surface with black mesh to create darkness, which helps the red worms thrive in dark and moist conditions. Additionally, you can water the surface slightly to help the worms adjust to the new environment, ensuring optimal conditions for their growth. Controlling moisture, temperature, and light in the environment for raising red worms is crucial. Regular adjustments must be made to ensure optimal conditions for the worms. The appropriate moisture level for red worms is around 70–80%. It should be checked every 2 to 3 days. How to check moisture? If you have a moisture meter, it will provide the most accurate measurement. Otherwise, you can check by hand and visually. Take a handful of biomass from the surface of the worm bed and gently squeeze it. If a small amount of water seeps between your fingers, the moisture level is just right. If no water seeps out and the biomass crumbles when you release your hand, the moisture is too low and you need to water it. If too much water seeps out, the moisture is too high, and you should gently stir the surface biomass and remove the black mesh cover to let the excess moisture evaporate. The optimal temperature range for red worm growth is between 18 to 30 degrees Celsius. Pay close attention and adjust the temperature as needed. Red worms prefer darkness, so the worm farm should be kept as dark as possible. Note: raising red worms on a large scale can attract pests such as mole crickets, ants, rats, and toads. New breeders need to be vigilant. If mole crickets are found in the worm bed, you can purchase Regent insecticide, mix it with roasted bran, and place it in a bowl or tray inside the worm bed, or follow the steps recommended by agricultural experts. For ants, simply remove the cover mesh and water regularly at an appropriate level to eliminate them. For rats and toads, they need to be caught regularly, especially during the rainy season when toads are more abundant. The harvest time for red worms is approximately 40 to 45 days from the time of releasing the worms. This time frame is relative and can vary depending on the weather. For example, during spring and autumn, when the weather is warm and favorable, the harvest time may be earlier. The first step is to feed the worms with a very diluted mixture on the surface a day before harvesting. This helps lure the worms to the surface, making it easier to collect more worms. For small-scale harvesting, you can use your hands or a shovel to scoop about 5 to 7 centimeters from the surface where the worms were fed the previous day, the area where most worms are concentrated. Then, use your hands or tools to push the layer of compost back into the worm bed. Repeat this process multiple times until all the compost is removed, leaving only the worms. For large-scale farm harvesting, you can use specialized machinery to separate the worms from the compost. However, it is still necessary to manually sift through the mixture once more to ensure a clean separation of worms and compost. After harvesting, a small number of worms and eggs will remain in the worm bed, and you can continue feeding them for reproduction and further development. Note: the best time to harvest during the day is early in the morning when it's cool, as the worms are still concentrated on the surface. The time required to harvest worm castings is longer than the time needed to harvest the worms. On average, it takes about 3 to 6 months from the time of releasing the worms to the harvesting of castings. This is because the worms need time to consume food and excrete the castings. Harvesting the castings. Similar to worm harvesting, before collecting worm castings, it is necessary to lure the worms to the surface. After separating the worms from the castings, the worm castings will be moved to the storage area to reduce moisture, then packed into bags for sale on the market, or can be directly used as fertilizer for plants. Once all the castings have been collected, worms can be reintroduced into the bed and continue to be fed for the next round of production. Note: worm castings should be harvested periodically to keep the worm bed aerated, ensuring the worms can develop optimally. These are basic, detailed guidelines for worm farming techniques. I hope you can apply them to your own worm farming setup for the best results. Thank you for watching this video. If you found the information helpful, don't forget to like, subscribe to the channel, and stay tuned for more informative videos. Feel free to leave your comments or questions in the section below, and we will do our best to answer all of your inquiries. See you in the next videos.